call to order the Committee on House Administration for today's committee markup. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. The meeting record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to be included therein. We are here today to formally approve a committee resolution to adopt franked mail allowances for committees for the 115th Congress. Each House committee needs a specific amount of resources to conduct business. The resolution before us authorizes an allowance of $5,000 per year for each committee's mail, the same maximum amount that has been authorized for the past several Congresses. I believe this is an appropriate level that will meet the needs of every committee. I would now like to recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement if he wishes.
Mr. Chairman, I support this routine resolution and I urge its adoption.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. I would ask if any other member of the committee wishes to be recognized for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Seeing none, I now call up and lay before the committee resolution to approve franked mail allowances for committees for the 115th Congress. Without objection, the first reading of the resolution is dispensed with, and the resolution is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Is there any debate? Are there any members who want to offer an amendment to the resolution? If not, I move the committee adopt the resolution. The question is on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Without objection, the markup is adjourned. Call to order the Committee on House Administration for today's hearing examining the Smithsonian Institution and its priorities. The hearing record will remain open for 5 legislative days, so members may submit any materials they wish to be included. A quorum is present, so we may proceed. In 1846, Congress created the Smithsonian Institution at the behest of Englishman James Smithson. A scientist by trade, Mr. Smithson willed his estate to the United States to found at Washington under the names of the Smithsonian Institution, an establishment for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. Today, the Smithsonian Institution encompasses 19 museums, 9 research centers, and the National Zoo. The Smithsonian Institution plays a critical role in collecting and preserving our nation's history and culture. The Smithsonian Institution also works with entities around the world to advance critical scientific discovery and research. For the past 20 months, Secretary David Skorton has led the institution. The committee looks forward to discussing the new strategic plan, which is currently being drafted with Secretary Skorton, that will guide the Smithsonian Institution over the next decade. We expect to hear from Secretary Skorton on the challenges the Smithsonian Institution faces, particularly in an environment in which federal funding is uncertain at best. These challenges include such things as balancing new strategic initiatives with available funding, broadening public access to its collections both in person and digitally, operating a new museum, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and revitalizing one of the most visited museums in the world, the National Air and Space Museum. Preserving priceless collections for scientific research to tell the American story, and not glamorous but very important, prioritizing facility maintenance and revitalization needs. I particularly want to focus on this last challenge. It is our hope to address the realities faced by the Smithsonian Institution today. By realities, I am talking about the growing list of deferred maintenance projects, the rising costs associated with maintaining and operating museums and facilities, and protecting collections for their future use. These realities must be a pillar of the upcoming strategic plan, and this committee looks forward to seeing the strategic plan upon its completion. So I thank Secretary Skorton for his appearance before the committee today, and I'd like to now recognize the ranking member of the committee, Mr. Brady, for the purpose of providing an opening statement. Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling this hearing. Everyone loves the Smithsonian, so I appreciate the opportunity to hear from our witnesses about what is happening there and how we can be helpful. Of course, I'll emphasize my number one concern about the Smithsonian, that access to our museums and many of our exhibits remain free. That has always been my priority. I want to acknowledge the Smithsonian presence in my district. The African American Museum in Philadelphia and the National Museum of American Jewish History are Smithsonian affiliates, and they are proud of that, and I am honored to represent those great institutions. Also, since 2012, the Smithsonian has had 40 fellows, 59 interns, and 31 research associates from my district, so I'm well represented there. I'm proud of the work my constituents are doing to advance the cause of the Smithsonian. I look forward to hearing from you, Mr. Secretary, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to be recognized for the purpose of an opening statement? Seeing none, I'd like to now introduce our witness. Dr. David Skorton is the 13th Secretary of the Smithsonian. He assumed his position on July 1, 2015. As Secretary, Dr. Skorton oversees the entire institution and its entities. Dr. Skorton is the first physician to lead the Smithsonian. He is a board-certified cardiologist and previously was the president of Cornell University. Again, we thank the Secretary for joining us today, and the committee has received your written testimony, and the Chair now recognizes Secretary Skorton for 5 minutes. Dr. Skorton.
Thank you, Chairman Harper and Ranking Member Brady and all the members of the committee for the opportunity and the honor of testifying today. My colleagues and I greatly appreciate the continuing support of the Congress and your confidence in our work to understand, preserve, and tell the story of America and to inspire new generations to dream the American dream. Your investment in the Smithsonian is an investment in the civic, educational, scientific, and artistic life of our nation. The Smithsonian is the world's largest museum, education, and research complex, and through our museums, the National Zoo, the research centers, and education initiatives, we seek every day to help all of us as Americans understand each other, ourselves, and our role in the world, in part through the arts and humanities. We use increasingly cutting-edge technology to create unprecedented access to our treasures, and we seek to inspire educators, students, and learners of all ages. Last year was exceptional for the institution, culminating with the opening of the National Museum of African American History and Culture. This beautiful and thought-provoking museum has been a huge success with the public. We have hosted more than 1 million visitors since the end of September. The year 2017 will be a time of transition for our institution as we implement, as the Chairman mentioned, a new strategic plan. Building on the tremendous momentum of the previous strategic plan, we are working closely with the Strategic Planning Committee to incorporate input from across the Smithsonian before presenting the plan to our Board of Regents, to the Office of Management and Budget, and to the Congress. A strong strategic plan will allow the institution to focus even more effectively on our key priorities, improving how we pursue our core mission, better leveraging partnerships with American and international organizations, communicating more effectively, cultivating our generous donors and supporters, and identifying and advancing special specific initiatives. In the months and years ahead, we seek to increase our positive impact as we convene important conversations, continue our important work in science and history while sharpening our focus on the arts, promoting diversity leadership, enhancing our global reach, establishing a culture of national thought leadership, greatly increasing digital access, and refocusing expenditures on maintaining and revitalizing existing facilities. Many important issues have a national and global impact, and the Smithsonian is bringing people together to discuss solutions. Our research centers do important work to understand the correlation between healthy ecosystems and our own well-being, a concept termed by the Center for Disease Control as One Health, helping us to address emerging threats from pandemic disease to species decline. Research and scholarship at the Smithsonian are anchored by our national collections. Today, I brought some personal favorites, especially Sandy Koufax's baseball mitt, which would have been a favorite of my late dad, who was a big fan of his. It is our obligation in the public interest to hold these national treasures and preserve them for future generations. One way that we preserve and expand access to our collections is by digitizing them. To date, we have digitized more than 29 million items from the 154 million items in the collection, with many available to download in people's homes, in labs, and in classrooms. And in this way, we seek to serve the many, many Americans who cannot visit our museums on the Mall or in New York City. Our collection space framework plan guides our long-term decisions about the collections, from our facilities to the way we care for the collections. Facilities maintenance will be a major focus in the coming years as we continue to address our large deferred maintenance and repair needs. Reducing this backlog, I believe, gives the best value to the American taxpayer, since inadequately funded maintenance can lead to costlier capital improvements down the road. One such project that the Chairman mentioned is the National Air and Space Museum revitalization. As you know, the building systems have greatly exceeded their useful lives. They are overtaxed by the over 7 million annual visitors to the museum, which is nearly 4 times more than they were designed for. The building's exterior stone cladding is failing and needs to be replaced. The Air and Space Museum project 35% design estimates are $676 million. But as it evolves, every effort is being made to contain these project costs. Although this is an enormous expense, we believe the project is absolutely essential and hope to begin construction in fiscal year 2018. We will leverage this federal investment by raising an additional $250 million in private support to totally revamp the 23 galleries throughout the facility. The result will be an exciting new experience, in essence, a new National Air and Space Museum. While the Smithsonian is nationally important, our reach is also global. We work around the world to protect and preserve cultural heritage and to do groundbreaking scientific research. In 2017, we aimed to finalize an agreement with the renowned Victoria and Albert Museum to create a first international museum exhibition presence in London, which does not involve a capital project. Though our creative staff continues to have impressive success, we do face significant challenges. We need to provide adequate staffing, including security, at the new National Museum of African American History and Culture. We need to fill more curatorial positions throughout the institution and enhance security across our most visited sites. As we look ahead to fiscal 2018, the institution is prepared for any budget contingencies. We've recently appointed a group of 10 unit directors to serve as a budget review panel to look at potential scenarios and to make recommendations to ensure the most efficient use of precious federal resources. Given our budgetary constraints and a growing maintenance backlog and facility renovation, we must use capital resources wisely and efficiently. We are fully committed to better telling the story of all Americans. However, despite the worthy recommendations for new museums to be added to the Smithsonian, we currently lack the capacity and resources to bring new museums to fruition. Again, I am honored to be a part of this great institution. The Smithsonian is a valuable resource that I believe has proven its worth for 171 years as a steward of our past and investment in our future. I'm confident that with the continued support of Congress and the administration, we can be even more relevant and a unifying presence in an increasingly diverse and vibrant America. Thank you for the chance of interacting with you today, and I look forward to any and all questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Scorden, for your testimony. We'll now move to our questions portion, and I'll begin by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. You know, there's so many treasures, and of course, you've brought just a small collection here, but of pretty priceless baseball objects. But these treasures are throughout the system, and one of my favorites is in the Air and Space Museum, which is our plane from Mississippi, the Key Brothers airplane, the Curtis Robin monoplane, where in 1935 the Key Brothers set the flight endurance record at 27 days without landing, and that's still the record for that. And so your plane hangs in the Smithsonian when that happens. So it's something that's a real treasure to us to see that. But I wanted to talk to you about some of these issues, particularly where we are on how we're going to move forward and do the things that are necessary. What do you see as the biggest risk facing the Smithsonian today or in the future, and how do you intend as the Smithsonian to manage that risk?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We really have two categories of risks to the Smithsonian. One is the risk of our inability to keep up with maintenance and revitalization backlog. We maintain approximately 12 million square feet of space. Last year, we had over 20 million individual visitors to our museums. And in some cases, like the National Air and Space Museum, we continue to have multiples of the number of visitors that my predecessors thought might actually come, almost 4 times the number right now that were initially suggested. So that's just one of many examples. And as I mentioned in the testimony, it's very important to realize that inadequate funding and attention to maintenance and backlog and revitalization needs will eventually lead to costlier capital projects. So that's one whole category. Okay. The other category, besides the physical capital, is the human capital. And it's very important that we pay attention to our curatorial ranks, to the science ranks. Like all organizations in our country, we are graying, and the aging workforce at the Smithsonian means that we have to be ready to hire a renewed workforce as people get to retirement. And so we're planning very carefully our use of resources so that we can increase the curatorial ranks, some hopefully by federal funding, some through philanthropy, and in the meantime, work on these capital issues.
Okay. How will the national campaign, how will the funds raised from the national campaign support the operations and maintenance of facilities?
So the national campaign, which has been very, very successful because of the huge generosity of the American public, corporations, and individuals, we've raised over $1.6 billion in the campaign so far. The campaign continues through the end of this calendar year. The funds are used for a wide variety of uses, but to specifically answer your question about facilities, they are used for upgrades and renovations, largely to interior spaces. And so one example that those of us in Washington know about is the renovation of the Renwick Gallery. And this allowed us to do things in that space that we were unable to do and led to a tremendous increase in visitorship to that. And there's other examples, but that's one that I think shows the possibility of philanthropy helping us. It's difficult to raise philanthropy for the sort of changes that need to be done to the National Air and Space Museum. I want to hasten to add, however, because, for example, replacing now defective stone cladding on the outside, in my experience fundraising of approximately 25 years, I found it hard to get philanthropists interested in that sort of project, whereas interior things we can. And to restate it, our goal is to raise $250 million to redo every single one of the 23 galleries within the museum.
It's obviously a goal of I think all of us, and I know with you, to make sure that admission to the Smithsonian remains free of charge, so that groups, school groups and others can come up and not have an expense to come in. So what populations of visitors, who can we get to come in? How can we expand what's there to open this up even further?
But first of all, I want to thank you for bringing the point up and thank the ranking member for bringing up the point about free entry. I am absolutely committed, as is the entire Smithsonian family, to maintaining free access to these museums. It's critical. The museums were set up in the public interest, and we want to be there for all Americans. Having said that, our best efforts to get people to come to the mall and to our facilities in New York City are always going to fall short of the number of Americans who could attend. So we're trying in other ways to reach out to America where it lives. One approach is through digitization of the collections to the extent that we can do that, and that allows us to allow people in their own living room, so to speak, to look at individual parts of the collection and learn more about all the things that we're studying. The second, as you've mentioned very kindly, is our 216 affiliate museums around the country, and we have affiliate museums in all the states represented on this committee. A third is our traveling exhibition service, which allows us to bring parts of our collection to Main Street USA. And then we have other ideas through the use of social media and other new technologies to reach out to America. So we want to make sure that people feel welcome at the mall and welcome in other parts of the city where we have facilities here and in New York City, but we also want to reach out beyond. And to summarize again at the end, we're absolutely committed to maintaining free admission.
Great. Thank you so much, Secretary Gordon. I'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Brady, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I heard your last statement. You're going to keep it free, right?
Yes.
Free admission. Thank you. Appreciate that. What more can we do to expand the Smithsonian Affiliates Program? I have two, as I mentioned in my earlier statement in my district, and I think it's a good way to bring the power of the Smithsonian to other parts, other districts, and throughout the United States. It's good feel and hand touch and see that they, instead of coming to Washington, they could get a glimpse and maybe hopefully come to Washington and visit the main campus, so to speak.
I'm hungry to continue to grow our affiliates program. It's grown very substantially under the leadership of my predecessor, Wayne Clough, and through the leadership of our acting provost, who's right here, Richard Curran. And it's grown substantially even in the 2 years or so that I've been here. So if you have any ideas, Congressman, please send them directly to me, and we will continue to look into it. In the meantime, we're also making sure that we have this robust traveling exhibition service so that we can go out to areas around the country, and I'm committed to both of those being very robust.
Good, thank you. And also, I want to commend you for your wisdom in maintaining and keeping Mr. Greg Abbott behind you there. Greg is formerly from my staff, and I know he's a great addition, does a great job. And we talked all the time when we had our hearings for 2-3 days that it's hard to keep good staff, but hard to keep them. We got to pay them, and so I'm sure you wouldn't mind. I'm sure you wouldn't mind a raise, sir. Just. Got to give you a plug, Greg. Got to give you a plug.
I've been told by our HR office to just not answer questions about Mr. Abbott's salary.
Well, I'll make that a private conversation someday.
I'm at your service, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll back my time.
Gentleman yields back. I'll now recognize Ms. Comstock for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank the witness today. It's delightful to be with you. I think I was in 3rd grade when I first came to the Smithsonian. My mom's a teacher, and so we dutifully went through, all of the highlights of the museum at that age, and she did the same with my 3 children, and now she's a docent at the Smithsonian, and so she's we're very good at now bringing the great-grandchildren around. And I am fortunate to have the Udvar Hazy Center museum in my district, and so my 2-year-old granddaughter and I and my husband were out there a few weeks ago, and I love the little picture setup you have where you can put on you can have a little spacesuit photoshopped onto you, and she was very excited. She got her ride in the spaceship on the space shuttle, and then she got that picture, so that's in her room, and she's thrilled. So when she's a astronaut somewhere down the road heading to Mars, we can thank you for all the good efforts that you make there. So I did want to ask about the Udvar Hazy as some of the renovations are going on and the planes and all in the storage facilities. How is that progressing at this time?
Thank you for your kindness. And I just want to mention we want to invite you and your granddaughter to come to the National Museum of American History, where the Wegmans Corporation has developed something we call Wonder Place, and it's aimed at children ages 0 to 6. 0 to 6. So we're
Wonder
very interested in
Place?
early child. It's called Wonder Place in the National Museum of American History, and we're glad to work with your staff.
Great.
If you want to come, we're actually more interested in having your grandchild, but you could also come along.
I'll get good grandma, Nana
So
points.
thank you very much for bringing up the issue of storage space relevant to National Air and Space Museum. So if I may take just a moment, Chairman, I'd like to just remind people the strategy that we want to use in revitalizing the National Air and Space Museum. We have two basic axioms that we want to follow in doing the revitalization. One is that we want to end up giving the United States of America a new National Air and Space Museum at the least possible cost, even though obviously it's a tremendous cost. And secondly, we want to keep the museum open to the American public. So our plan is to do it in phases and always to keep at least half of the museum open. In order to do that, we have to put some of the precious artifacts in there somewhere else. And so we have asked for, and it's going to be one of our top requests coming up, for an additional storage facility, as Representative Comstock mentioned, in your district, in the Udvar-Hazy area. That will serve two purposes. The first purpose is that it will allow us to efficiently move along with the plans for the revitalization. And then when that revitalization is complete, we will use that new storage facility to give us a big jump start on replacing some inadequate and non-optimal storage that we have throughout our system, because the growth in our collection has been done at such a breakneck pace. So that's the reason that that's a very high priority for us, and we hope for Congress's support in that request.
Thank you. And I did have first of all, I also wanted to thank you for digitizing the collection, because I do see as schools are, particularly in my area since I'm here locally, they are cutting back on field trips. They're not getting down and using the museums as much as they might, and I'm always surprised at even, on weekends, people not getting down and using this, coming, I guess maybe parking is always a challenge, and if Metro's not working right and all of that. We have Metro in my region, so as it expands, hopefully we'll get folks back in here. But I really appreciate the digitizing of it, because I think that can bring it to life and hopefully spur that interest. But then on another very different front, I wanted to ask how, because I know you noticed that, some of the people who are leaving in some of the senior positions at the museum, how do you plan for that transition and finding those key people? Because obviously these are very unique and important jobs to have the understanding of how to run a museum and to really have that skill set with these unique jobs. Where do you find the folks? What is the transition process, and how can we help with making that as smooth as possible?
Thank you very much for recognizing our other big challenge besides facilities, and that's the human capital, as we put it. And thank you also for being sensitive to realize that the skill set needed to work at this kind of creative organization, if not unique, is at least very, very unusual. I've found two things since being at the Smithsonian that have been hugely, hugely gratifying on this front. First is an immense feeling of pride, and I would even say joy, in the workforce of the Smithsonian. We tend year after year after year to rank high in agencies of our size in terms of employee satisfaction, always trying to do better. And I think part of that is that they're very proud of the positive things that we can do for America through education, through research, and through the, as our founder called it, the diffusion, that is, the museums themselves. The second thing I found is that when openings come up, we are inundated with people who want to come. People from the inside of the institution that want to move up the ladder, people from outside the institution that want to become part of something that is attempting to do positive. And if I might just say, in a time where museums and libraries are still respected and considered honest purveyors of information, I think people more and more would like to be a part of contributing to such a thing. So it is true, as you very insightfully noticed, that we have a lot of turnover happening in the institution right now. A lot of it is because of people having served there a very long time. And Just last night, in fact, Dr. Kieran and I were at a recognition party for our wonderful director of the National Museum of African Art, Dr. Janetta Cole, who likes to say that she just celebrated her 40th birthday times 2. And we're just in the process of beginning to look into that situation. So it is a challenge. The good news is that people seem to be very, very interested in being part of the Smithsonian, and I believe that'll continue in the future. And thank you for
And
asking
I
about
can
that.
tell you, my mom being a docent, the joy that she sees in the place and being able to continue to work with children. Actually, my daughter, the mom of the aforementioned little granddaughter, is 2 years old, actually was telling my daughter where she should buy her house based on the lovely children who came down. She kept saying they're in the area where they bought their house, what a nice group of children there were that she was taking through. So, but the employees really do bring joy to those children, and it is a delightful place to volunteer and work. So thank you
Thank
for
you.
creating that spirit.
Mr. Chairman, if I just might insert very
Yes, sir.
quickly, thank you also for reminding me to recognize our volunteers. We have about 6,500 paid employees. We have about the same number of in-person volunteers, as you've mentioned, and we have about the same number of digital volunteers who help us with things from a distance. Without the volunteers, we would not be able to open the doors in the morning. So thank you very much, Representative Comstock, for reminding me.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Nebraska, Mr. Smith, for 5 minutes for questioning.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Skorton. I appreciate your service. Deferred maintenance and backlogs and so forth. What would you say is the long-term plan to address this? And I see where there was a requested increase in facilities capital appropriations for FY 2017. Can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for your attention today. Deferred maintenance is a big issue and has been a big issue in every nonprofit I've worked for over the years, so it's definitely not unique to the Smithsonian. What's different about the Smithsonian is our public-facing nature, that we have millions of Americans walking in, so we're concerned not only about the beauty of the buildings, but about their functionality, but especially about security and safety for the people who come in. Industry standards suggest that we should be spending something on the order of 2, maybe 3% of the base in maintenance each year. And I'm very, very grateful to the huge, steady support that Congress has given us. Nonetheless, I must say that the money that's been appropriated has been about half of what projections would be for the future. So more funding for maintenance, even though it's always hard to come by, is the bedrock of going forward. Once the funding is available, and at whatever level, the other bedrock is having a carefully designed plan for prioritizing a dizzying number of things that need to be dealt with. And our facilities professionals have done it, in my experience of 30 years of leading institutions, have done an absolutely world-beating job of prioritizing based on really 2 criteria. One criterion, the chief one, is the public's safety and health. And the second one is what future costs could be reduced or prevented even if judicious things were done along the way to do maintenance and revitalization. And so because it's an interest of mine, Congressman, I've looked very carefully in the weeds at how this is done. I'm very impressed with what our facilities professionals are doing, and I hope to have more chance to speak to members of Congress about the importance of saving future costs by doing some preventive maintenance and deferred maintenance in the institution. And I very much appreciate your question.
Sure. And you utilize a lot of partnerships with the private sector for the promotion and exhibits and so forth. Yeah. Can private sources of funds be used for maintenance? Or do they get used for maintenance?
Private sources can definitely be used for interior changes. An example that I like to give is the Renwick Gallery in town here near the White House, where many of the things inside were done through philanthropy, and there's other examples. In my fundraising experience, and it's a long experience, I found it hard to interest philanthropists, either corporations or individuals, in helping with things that are falling apart, to just be plain about it. And we try that. I've tried in earlier philanthropic campaigns in other settings to interest donors in that, and I found it a very, very heavy lift to do that.
Hard to put a family name on a new roof or,
It's hard. But I'll tell you what is a beautiful partnership and a very exciting partnership, and I don't think there's a better exemplar in our country than the Smithsonian, is a partnership between solid federal funding that makes philanthropists say, you know, if the U.S. government is interested in keeping this thing at the top, I want to put my part in. And I like to think that it goes in the opposite direction as well. If I do my job and I bring in very robust philanthropic funding, and that is trying to lift ourselves up by our own bootstraps, perhaps you'll see us as not just showing up with our handouts. So I think both those things go together.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Davis, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Skorton, for being here today. My kids are always advocates of the Smithsonian when they're out here on regular occasions, and
Great.
it's great to be able to let them roam the mall and go see some of the great collections that you have. I got a question about the collection space framework plan that identified 47% of collection storage space is unacceptable. What is the plan, and how does it address the collections remaining in unacceptable spaces until facilities can be revitalized or constructed to meet acceptable standards?
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis, for your attention to that matter and for focusing us on one of the things that genuinely keeps me up at night. So we have this national collection of 154 million objects and specimens and things, and that's just the physical. We also have millions and millions and millions of other things in archives and so on. And that'll all be for naught if we can't take better care of them, so I appreciate your attention to that. We really have, again, a multi-phased approach through our facilities professionals. One is in every situation where maintenance is required, we have a careful prioritization. And in answer to Mr. Smith's question, I mentioned that we have this very careful process of prioritization based first on public safety and then based on the cost of eventual problems if we don't do it. And in the case of the collections, the prioritization is based on how hard it would be to replace something. Many of these things are absolutely irreplaceable. And then secondly, what the actual risks are in that particular building, in that particular space within the building, in that particular part of the space. In some cases, the facilities professionals have been able to do relatively modest, inexpensive things, changing the way a cabinet is used or putting new cabinetry in or things of that sort. And in other areas, we've just done our best to move things around and try to put things that are in the most danger in the best space. But I appreciate your question, and I must say, make no mistake about it, that we need to pay more attention to this. We hope for your support of things like the Udvar-Hazy place, because we have as much to do in high priority projects as we've already done. So we're about the halfway point on that. So again, it's prioritization, it's fixes that we can afford right now, and it's planning and working with the Office of Management and Budget and with Congress in general to put only our highest priority needs forward, which we have.
So you're going to prioritize some of the needs that we need to address at a time when, you know, our federal funds are very, very limited. I mean, these are concerns, because what you do and what the Smithsonian staff does on a regular daily basis is amazing. And to be able to have these properties, to be able to have these collections sitting in displays that are acceptable, great. To the you know, just the regular visitor, they may not know that some of these exhibits are in unacceptable standards. But at some point, you know, we will gladly ask you to come back, I'm sure, at the chairman's discretion, to talk about how you're working toward making these unacceptable conditions much more acceptable, and how that prioritization is working on behalf of the Smithsonian, but in the end, working on behalf of the taxpayers who are the visitors to your institution. So one last question. I do have a question about the Garber facility.
Garber, yes?
Yeah. At what expense, both time and funds, does relocating collections from the Garber facility have on your operations?
Can you ask it one more time, sir? I didn't hear that.
At what expense, both time and funds, does relocating collections from the Garber facility have on your everyday operations?
I see. There's no question that relocating items from that facility has a direct effect on the efficiency of our operations. And I apologize, I don't have an exact number to tell you right now linked to that, but I wonder if this would be acceptable to the Vice Chairman and to the Chairman if we came back to you very quickly with a more detailed set of information about the general question you asked, as well as the Garber, as well as the relationship between the request at Udvar Hazy and what's happening at Garber and that day-to-day operation. If that would be acceptable, rather than give you an imprecise answer now, I'd like to give you a more precise answer, which we can get to you in short order, if that's acceptable.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I want to tell you again how much we appreciate you being here today, Secretary Skorton. We take our oversight of the Smithsonian as a serious matter, just as you do your job. None of us like surprises, so we'll certainly try to keep very open lines of communication, and likewise, we're available if there's something that we need to know. I know you'll reach out to us as you have been doing, and we appreciate the great work that your team is doing. With that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days to submit to the chair additional written questions for the witness, which we will forward and ask the witness to respond as promptly as he can, so his answers may be made a part of the record. Without objection, this hearing is adjourned.
We should turn it into condos.